Welcome back to 96.3 HD2 and Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. When it comes to the success of schools and the students attending those schools, men matter. Now, that's not to say that women don't. But tonight, we're talking about getting dads and all other men involved in helping schools succeed. The Prince George's County Public School System has an important event. It's coming up, calling on men to roll up their sleeves and get busy. It's called the Men Make a Difference, the Power of Presence Conference, or POPS. My guests are Dr. Millard House II, Prince George's County School Superintendent, and Dr. Kenneth Harris II, Vice Chair of the Prince George's County Board of Education. Thank you both for joining this really important conversation. I appreciate it.
Great to be here with you, Harold.
Sure thing.
Yes, sir.
Let me share just a couple of numbers with you. Some 47% of Black children live without a father in the home. And that number is high, but it is the first time, literally since 1976, that more than half of our nation's Black youth are growing up with a dad inside the home. Now, men account for just 3% of kindergarten and pre-K teachers and 20% of elementary and middle school teachers, and 26% of all U.S. students are boys of color, but only 6% of teachers are men of color. I want to get into some of your thoughts about these numbers and also your thoughts about being fathers. Both of you are, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But first and foremost, Dr. Harris, how did this POPS idea come about?
Yeah, so POPS came about as conversation within my district that I represent, District 7, which is Suitland, Upper Marlboro, parts of District Heights. Within Prince George's County, I was having conversations with my parent community council advisory group, my PTOs of these different schools that we attend. And what I noticed kind of across the board was the level of fathers or males that were engaged in the PTO and the parent group was actually astoundingly low. And so I thought, where does that gap really turn to play? And PGCPS has done Men Make a Difference events for a little over a decade now, or maybe even further than a decade. And I thought, what would happen if we tried to connect all these nodes across the district to elevate that educational experience for all of our students? And so POPS comes from a place of having those conversations, finding out what happens when we get all the right people in the room and are having these tough conversations, either around safety and security or mental health or parent advocacy. What's the gap and how do we help to close that for all of our community members?
Dr. House, why do you believe that the participation of men in the school system is important?
So the father figure. The father figure, I think, is extremely important. To have them actively involved only builds upon that emotional notion that children have. You know, I'm a father of a PGCPS student, and I know that, you know, I have a lasting impact on my child's academic journey. A lot of times what happens, and that's not to discount, you know, mothers and grandmothers and aunts and females that are in this. But as a father, we know that we have an opportunity to have a child model the things that we do, our behaviors, our tendencies. And all of these things we know make a major difference in building a village, an educational village for our students. So I think this is a great idea that came from Dr. Harris's district, as he indicated. I think he's been a bit modest because he may have heard the ideas, but he formulated the thoughts around what this inaugural event is going to mean for our school district. And as he indicated, it's all about empowering men within our community to ensure that better educational outcomes are on the table for all of our kids. So I'm proud to not only be, you know, a PGCPS employee, but I'm proud to be a dad as well. And this is a moment to really showcase what that looks like.
So before we take a deep dive into that, I want to make sure that we get this information out about this event, Dr. Harris, where is it going to be? What time? And what can people expect?
Yeah, it's a day full of, I'll call it fun and excitement. We've got Wise High School in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. It'll be October the 12th. That's a Saturday. The conference takes place from 9 to 2. Now, the conference portion is not that entire time. It's a time for celebration, but it's also a time for work. So between the times of 9 and 12, we'll have an opening panel. That panel features a number of individuals that are known experts within their field, and also just have deep roots and deep ties to the community. So we've got Super Bowl champion Kyle Arrington, who's a former PGCPS alum. We have Senator Nick Charles. We have Paul Bachet, who is an author and a psychotherapist. Marvin Burden, who is an educator within PGCPS. And then we got Pastor Randy Pike, who is a pastor over at Zion Church. And so that panel will open us up and kick us off. And then we'll have breakout sessions. So our breakout sessions will cover safety and security, parent advisory, or parent advocacy, rather, building a community, a strong community in the schoolhouse. We'll be dealing with mental health supports. There's a cultural acclimation session that will be given completely in Spanish for our Spanish speaking and our multilingual participants that will be joining us. Then we'll roll into an award ceremony. That award ceremony is to highlight male figures that have been doing amazing work in their individual schools. And this was a pretty competitive process, but we've identified a handful of individuals from Prince George's County that we plan to acknowledge and show gratitude to at that time. And then from the time of 12 to 2, we'll be doing a car show outside. So if you're into cars and coffee, so if you're into exotic cars, classic cars, EVs, we'll be having that in the parking lot. A great time. We got some food trucks and vendors coming out. And then lastly, if you have not seen an electric bus that will be entering the PGCPS fleet, come out and see that. We'll have that parked there as well. So and a day full of fun and excitement, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Not to take anything away from any of the other guests, but certainly I know Paul Bachet personally. He's been on this program many times, and it doesn't get any heavier than Paul when it comes to talking about mental health for men, and not just the adults, but for children. And so certainly, my hat's off for you, making sure that Paul's powerful voice is there. That alone is certainly going to be rewarding. I want to talk a little bit about the role that you see for fathers or just men, Dr. House, in the school system. This isn't your first rodeo. You were obviously you were in Texas before you came here, and you had an opportunity to see during the course of your academic career the importance of having men participate and what can happen when they aren't participating. Just kind of share your thoughts about that.
Well, Harold, I heard you say something earlier that I think is extremely important for watchers and listeners to know and understand about Prince George's County. And one of the things that makes us very unique, we're a school district, of course, of about 132,000 students. But as we look at our workforce in terms of men, it was interesting. My first day of school for my son, he went to school, and I said, "Hey, how'd it go? How was your first day?" He said, "Well, I have 3 male teachers." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, that's fabulous." And of course, the educator in me, I said, we want to make sure that all of our teachers are effective, whether they're male or female. And he said, "You know what? We started out great with the relationship building, activities today, and it really made a difference." So, the research tells us the representation in public education in terms of males is a major difference maker. And knowing that 1 in 4 educators in our school system is a male is important. But I think that's equally as important for what children see at the household as well, in their neighborhoods, in their communities. Whether that be a father, as you mentioned some statistics earlier, or a significant male role model. that can make the difference. So regardless of what it is, Harold, whether it's that person in the home or that individual that plays a role of what it is to play that significant model of what can be, what it can look like from the standpoint of a man is very, very important. So that's one of the things that it really excites me about this difference maker of a conference that's coming forward, and it doesn't take, quite frankly, research to tell us and to know that having a male role model consistently in a child's, regardless of whether it's a male child or female child, can make a major difference in terms of their educational outcomes.
Yeah, you talked about the research, and as you said, you don't need the numbers. But what has your observation been during the course of your career, particularly when those male figures are not there? And not, this isn't about the boys, this is about the children.
Yep. I can give you an example, Harold. When I was a principal in another state of the next to lowest performing school in the state. It was my first principalship. And one of the things that I noticed in that principalship is that we had a number of incarcerated male parents in that particular school. And we developed a pen pal program. And when I tell you the number of kids that participated and the number of issues that those kids had, and how their relationships got better over the course of time, it was empirical evidence for me as a administrator to see how there was a drop off in a number of these children's lives because of their parent being incarcerated. But watching the development of them communicate with their fathers and build relationships with their fathers was a huge difference. So it's not just about the data that you said. I've seen empirical examples of what this looks like and the difference that it can and should make in the lives of our children.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Harris, you have young children, very, very young children. What I think a 4-year-old, and congratulations, in order 15 months. Is that correct?
15 months. Do I look well rested, or?
Yeah, I started asking you a question because you were starting to nod off. So,
oh man, I gotta get to sleep where I can. Now I was awake.
But so you've not entered into the space of having a child in school, but I'm sure you have plans. What are your plans as a father to make sure that your children have the best educational outcomes and experience?
Yeah, and I tell you, a lot of my answer here is going to be based on what I saw growing up in my own household. And so my father was very present. Like he worked really, really hard, but he always prioritized the educational needs of both my sister and I. There's only two of us. And so I want to emulate that in my style of fathering. As you said, my son is 4, so he'll be starting school next year. Our goal and our intent is to have him in Prince George's County Public Schools. I graduated and came out of Prince George's Public Schools. I went to Samuel Ogle Elementary when it was an elementary school, all the way up to Eleanor Roosevelt High School. And I know, Mr. Fisher, you and I share that. And that's where the commonality might stop. If we go to other things, we'll talk about it a bit later. So
hold that point, because I don't want you to forget. I don't want you to forget your point, but I do need to take a very short break. And I want to remind our listeners and our viewers, don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. That's our website. The original Quiet Storm is next. That's on WHUR-FM. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are continuing our conversation about getting more men to participate in the success of schools and the children, attending those schools. My guests are Dr. Millard House II, Prince George's County School Superintendent, and Dr. Kenneth Harris II, Vice Chair of the Prince George's County Board of Education. Before the break, Dr. Harris, you were talking about your educational process in Prince George's County.
Yeah, so my graduating from the school system, like I said, all the way from Samuel Ogle to Eleanor Roosevelt High School. My father and both my parents were actually very involved within my educational journey, and like I said, a lot of that I am emulating within my own parental style that we have now. I feel as though things are important, such as PTA meetings, PTO meetings. I feel as though it's important to know your educator and know the style in which your student needs to be educated. And I realize that I'm fortunate. I was brought up in a fortunate household. I was blessed. I was brought up, and not everyone has this. But my parents, again, were very hands-on in that educational journey. We realized that education does not only reside within the four walls of that schoolhouse. It extends beyond that to what's happening within the home as well. And so I had just that village supporting me. And presently, as I said, came out of Prince George's County Public School, went to university, still work here within Maryland in a career that I absolutely love. And I'm an engineer, so this will make more sense. I'm an engineer, and I struggle with math a lot. I struggled with math a lot growing up. And the fact that my parents took that intentionality to then partner with the educator to figure out, okay, so how can we get him over this hump, even though I was thinking about giving up a number of times, even going up to the college level. There was a time where I had almost decided that I was going to switch my major entirely because I was having such a struggle with this subject. And so just that intentionality that not only my dad, but my parents enacted in me is something that I hope to emulate within my own children one day. Just that keep going, don't quit mindset.
And Harold, it was a very, very similar scenario with me. Not only were both of my parents actively involved, but both of them were educators. And, you know, with seeing my father, who was responsible for the desegregation of schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma, very active in and around kind of Black Wall Street. My mother was a first grade teacher that recognized in me early on that there were some special needs and gave me the assistance, the confidence, everything that was necessary to become successful. All of those things that Dr. Harris just explained are very much true for me as well. But the thing that has really touched me over the course of time is that not every child has my experience. Not every child has Dr. Harris's experience in having that mother or father that plays that integral role. And so I think this is where a conference like this can step in, where we can offer tools, offer examples, offer a brotherhood that can allow for fathers to join and have examples of opportunities of what it is to help with the overall outcomes of their children.
So you make a really important point, Dr. House, because like you, my father was an educator. My stepmother was an educator in the DC public school system. My mother also taught in the DC public school system, retired, and she is still living, and even in retirement, still a participating educator. But as you say, and let me just say, and I think I mentioned this to you, my daughter is now a teacher in the Prince George's County school system. My sister started as an educator before moving on to a different career. But like you said, Dr. House, what do you say to those fathers and those men who don't have the benefit of a college education, do not have the benefit that you and I had, where they had, well-educated parents who were not just hands-on, but hands-in. And those fathers who are wondering, well, I don't know what I don't know. How do you encourage them? How do you get them to participate?
And I think that was a part of what the brainchild that Dr. Harris talked about early on when he heard from his community, and how we can bring fathers along, bring men along that may not have been actively engaged as they want to. I think regardless of your participation in the past, this is an opportunity to build capacity, to understand how you can have even more influence. The one thing that comes with fatherhood is an undeniable influence over a child that will never go away. But the question is, do you want that to be a positive influence, or do you want that to be an influence that is negative? And I think herein lies an opportunity where we're building capacity in this conference that allows for individuals to understand what it is to have that positive influence. This is not about not knowing, not understanding, or being scared of an opportunity. This is about developing a brotherhood of what it is to help others that come to the table just like us.
Mm-hmm. Your thoughts about those fathers, Dr. Harris, who may not feel that they have the tools or the wherewithal to positively influence either their children's education or even those men who are not fathers, but
Yep.
still want to step in and step up.
Yeah, and again, the Pops Conference is targeted toward all men, regardless if they are fathers or not. I think that how we start to target this is something I alluded to earlier, being that village approach. I really think it's community. I think it's that village approach. I think it's how we offer new ways of networking, new ways of mentorship, new ways to just get men involved within our community to, again, help elevate and uplift the educational experience for all of our students. I think when it comes to not knowing what you don't know, there's so many talents that our community can bring into the schoolhouse and into the overall community. And I think that what we're trying to address at this conference is how these separate buckets all impact education, right? So when you think of mental health, that directly impacts the educational experience of a student. When you look at parent advocacy, that's something that impacts. We know within Prince George's County, 1 out of every 4 students, I think, Dr. House, is a multi-language learner. And so we know that Prince George's County is unique in that way. How do we then take the uniqueness of Prince George's County, coupled with these microcosms, being these smaller events that all add up to the grand picture of elevating the educational experience? And so I want to encourage our fathers who might not feel as though they're checking the box, that you absolutely do. You're checking that box in some way, and we are hoping to elevate that skill or elevate that talent you have to contribute to the community as a whole.
Dr. House, your son's first experience notwithstanding, what do you think is the secret sauce to get more men to become teachers? We've known for many years that there has been a shortage. We talked about that in the beginning. So how do you get more in the classroom?
I think that's the golden question, Harold. Not only do we need more male teachers, we need more teachers, period. But I think having, and I wasn't an educator, but I got hooked. And the reason I got hooked is because a principal that walked into the barbershop that I was working in at that particular time gave me the opportunity to get in front of kids. And it was that ability to influence the mindset of a student that hooked me. That it was just that hook. And I think if we provide opportunities, whether that's through volunteerism, whether that's through our safe passage program, whatever it may be, they can see that getting in front of children and using their stories to influence, along with some training and development, and potentially getting in one of our Grow Your Own programs, can make a major difference in terms of a career ladder. I think it's also an opportunity to to really live with what we know our blueprint for education should be, and making sure that we pay our educators. We know we have to be at a certain level of pay within the next, really the next 12 months. And but people need to understand where these opportunities are, how to actually go about becoming an educator, and understand that regardless of whether you have a formal bachelor's degree or not, there's a pathway to get you there, to be able to sit into a classroom and influence children through our curriculum and our instruction. So it's really just informing and making certain that people understand that there is a pathway into this profession for you to have that influence and make a difference on hundreds and thousands of children over the years to come.
Dr. Harris, during the course of my career, I've covered a whole lot of school boards in several states. And one of the things that I've noticed in each and every one of them was that unless there was a problem, you rarely saw men attending the school board meeting. You had your activists, okay, who may have also been parents. Then you had some activists who were not. Let's just throw that out for a moment. But I remember, and I was particularly struck, this was 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, that Overland Park, Kansas, upper middle class community in the Kansas City metro system, there were virtually no men of any color in that community. It was all women attending the school board meeting. With that said, how do you get them to participate in the legislative process of the school board and the schools when there isn't a problem?
Right. I would say that I've also noticed that within Prince George's County and just other school boards I've seen, other meetings I've watched, is that it is majority, again, as you said, unless there's a problem and, strength in numbers type mentality, you rarely do see men within these meetings. And so I think that one of the biggest things that we can do is, Mr. House alluded to this in terms of the information sharing. But another thing that we hope to accomplish within events like this, and just from the board member level of having your individual parent groups or community groups, is to make sure that that process is understood in terms of from the legislation process, from our delegates and our senators, all the way down to what a board member can actually do, because those are two very different things. But what they take is partnership across the legislators, across county council, across board members. They all take partnership to connect the dots to ultimately make that change for our students. So when it comes to increasing the attendance there, I think it comes with going within your community, having those conversations, saying, listen, we're talking about XYZ. This is why it's important to your school. You should either come, write a public comment. You don't have to come and, bang on the table and make noise. You can be there for support. You can be there to be present. Thing with the Power of Presence Conference, just being present within your community. But information sharing is the biggest thing that we've been trying to nail down for the longest time. And I think that comes with the additional partnership just across the board.
I think it's also, Harold, about understanding the cultural history of males in different communities as well. If you look at the African American household, or you even look at the fastest growing population of household members in our Latino population. In many cases, the male is considered as the breadwinner, the individual that works from sunup to sundown. And traditionally, the female in that culture is the individual that will handle the day-to-day duties and responsibilities of the child. I think what's important here is to be able to show men of all cultures that we are all intricately important, and we all have a vital role in what this looks like, regardless of whether you're Black, Latino, white. I think this is a great opportunity to educate men of all colors.
So, how do you believe, Dr. Harris, this will help those children whose fathers are not in the household or not in their lives at all? What role might the men participating in the POPs conference play for those children who have no father figures?
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point. Again, my goal is to make sure that the resources are provided. It's an understanding of where we might have gaps within Prince George's County, and then ultimately to improve networking and mentorship opportunities. And it doesn't have to be on the full district scale. My hope is that we then go back to the community approach, either within districts or the schools, so that then we can then impact that unique change that each school individually needs. And I'm not saying that, hey, if a young man or a young woman doesn't have a father or a father figure, someone should step into their lives. There's actually a student from Oxon Hill that I ran into, and his father unfortunately passed away when he was significantly younger. And what he said to, as I was listening to a conversation, what he said to the gentleman speaking to him was, hey, I'm not looking for a father. I'm not looking for a replacement to my father. What I'm looking for is guidance. What I'm looking for is knowledge to be able to navigate certain situations, but I'm not looking for a replacement. So by no means are we trying to use this to say, hey, every household needs one of these. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is that there are unique situations and we need to deal with them in individual situations. So hopefully when people come to this conference, they engage with not only the breakout sessions and those leaders, but also just the independent vendors that we have there. I'm hoping that they walk away with the resources and ultimately some actions that they can take to impact their individual communities and continue to have these conversations until next year when we do this again.
So we've spoken about teachers, but what about the role of administrators as the men move up the ladder? How significant do you think their presence is, Dr. House?
I think it's just as significant to see both men and women in leadership roles. I think is important. What we traditionally saw through the 70s and early 80s was a imbalance of more men in administrator roles, but you're seeing a balance in the other direction, where you're seeing more women that are deservingly so rolling into those opportunities and providing those roles. But I think it's important to see men, women, not only in the role of educational administrators, but much like men, like Dr. Harris, that are engineers, that are in the human resources comms, like you, Harold, individuals that are really doing things and influencing minds and in having an influenceable voice around what happens. So I think to be able to highlight as many individuals, whether it's in education or not, whether it's your father or not, to be able to have that example. We're in this social media age now, where if you find someone that influences you, you can study them. You can study their mannerisms. You can study their speech patterns. You can study their decision making, and it's an awesome opportunity for us to put men in touch with students that they can essentially be followed on social media. It doesn't necessarily have to be the formal mentorship opportunities that we traditionally saw years ago. There's a different way about this that I think is very unique and very innovative, that I think can make a difference with a number of children for the years to come.
Dr. Harris, you spoke about the benefits of having more men actively participating in the educational process of their children or the schools more broadly. But what do you think is the danger of not having more men participate?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that everyone plays a role, right? And I think that the danger across, I guess this is really any discipline, with across any discipline, when people don't play their role, there's obviously things that can go wrong and be out of balance. I'm big on balance, the balance of things, the balance of the universe, what have you. And so within the community, if we don't have the men within our community, the same way if we don't have the women within our community stepping up to fulfill that role, and when I say role, I don't mean gender role, but I just mean role in general that they're meant to do, then there will be some form of imbalance. Now, when it comes to our individual schoolhouse, what we see oftentimes is when men are involved, there's more outlashing and things of that nature. When men are involved, there might not be as much order in some places, and that's not to say that there can't be order, but with presence comes a certain demeanor that's carried. And like I said, I'm not trying to take anything away from any roles. I'm trying to be really careful with my words here, because I realize I'm trying to be very intentional with that, because I don't want anyone to feel slighted. But everyone does have a genuine role to play that contributes to the educational success of our students, and ultimately the career success of our educators and our administrators.
And suffice it to say, if there was an issue with women not participating, then this would not be a conversation about in a fathers or men's conference. We would be talking about a women's conference.
Right.
So certainly you're in being careful. Certainly I understand that, but that is not, this particular conversation. And I would think that anyone who heard this conversation would understand that we know the role that women are playing, have played, mothers, grandmothers, aunties, teachers' aides, teachers, principals, et cetera, et cetera.
And Harold, that's a part of kind of why we're in this space. Women have been more actively engaged in the day-to-day educational experience of children, but this is an opportunity to engage and elevate as many men around the importance of what this looks like, and an opportunity, like Dr. Harris said earlier, to build capacity while encouraging more and more men to have that productive relationship with the schoolhouse, at the home, in the community as a whole. We're not bringing any judgment to the table during this time on November the 9th at Oxon Hill High School. This is all about engaging and elevating.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Dr. House, because you said your son he's in 8th grade. Is that correct?
He's seventh grade.
7th grade. Okay. 7th grade, 8th grade. Same age group. And my question is, and this is a question about raising an adolescent boy. We know that for years that is a critical time, 12, 13, 14. That is a time when they can be lost, or that is a time when they can show the promise of being the next Dr. Kenneth Harris II. Alpha Phi Alpha notwithstanding. But I had to get that in. But, from a father's perspective, what are you focusing on, and what kind of advice would you give to a father who is saying, I don't know what I'm going to do with this 13-year-old boy or 12-year-old boy? What would you tell him?
I think it's teaching them the life skills of what it is to be a young man, and what better way to get some of those examples than from another man that's been a young man. So one of the things as a father that I work on with my son from time to time is that, did you look them in the eye? Did you shake their hand? Did you introduce yourself? These are the same things that Dr. Harris and I work through on a day-to-day basis in our relationship and being a board member and a superintendent, going to work on a daily basis, how to work in teams. But these are some of the same things that we can give advice in and around to another young man or our son, and that make a major difference. The likability factor, as a Black man, is it important for me to be respected or liked on the job? What's a difference maker in terms of making progress in both of those issues? Because I want to be liked and respected. But I have those kinds of conversations with young men. I have those kind of conversations with my son. And I have the luxury of having a phenomenal wife at home, and we kind of share our roles in reference to what different things look like. But there's certain things that I go about. I'm a handyman of sorts, and I always reach to that back door and say, "Hey, Trey, come on out here and join me. Just watch, and see what I'm doing." I think those kinds of things build character. They build an opportunity to have a well-rounded focus around skill sets that you can have. So I think there are so many different opportunities to show what you know to a youngster around different things that may not be as engaging to a female. My wife doesn't necessarily enjoy being out in the yard and those kinds of things, but those things are important to me, and they're very important for me to be able to share those kind of things with my son.
Dr. Harris, I'll let you have the last word with this question. Your son is 4, so you're still mixing the concrete, as it were. And so, but in doing so, what is going through your mind when you're planting what you hope will be the proper seeds for the best development of your son?
Yeah. Presence. One of the biggest things I wanted to do for my children, not just my son, was to be present. And for them to know, and I'm very intentional about this, if I'm on a call or I'm doing something and they come in and they need me, I do try to pause what I'm doing, address them quickly so that they know that if something is needed, Dad is here for you. The other thing I'd say is that, for my son, who's a bit older than my daughter, and even with her, everything I do, I try to make an educational experience for them in some way, even at his young age. Superintendent House mentioned a few minutes ago, but just normal protocol that we see as normal in terms of, am I looking this person in the eye? Are we shaking hands? Are we introducing ourselves? Things like that. But from that educational lens, specifically as he's learning to read and write and do things with numbers, I try to make it, fun. So in my household, I do most of the cooking, right? I think of myself as some amateur form of chef. And so I like my son to, come with me to do these cooking things. So join me in the kitchen. Okay, we're going to count out the eggs. We need 4 eggs. Count to 4 for me here. Or we're going to read the recipe on this book. Tell me what this word is. Something very small that can be fun, but also educational. I want him to just see how everything is tied together. Again, growing up, I was fortunate. One of the main reasons I got into engineering and rocket propulsion and all that fun stuff is because my dad was an engineer. I saw him operate in that field. He would pick me up from school at Samuel, and we would go right to work, and I would take naps underneath his desk because he was still working. Burn the midnight oil, and I'd have to hang out there with him. But what I saw was that intentionality that he still wanted to be there for me, even though he had responsibilities. And so what I hope to emulate for my children and what I hope to impart on them is that presence matters. The presence that dad's here for you, mom's here for you, grandpa's here for you, grandma's here for you. And just be able to show them that through the village approach, really anything is possible, no matter what. And, just because as Black men, if I can be real right now, as Black men, there's a lot of times where people talk down to you. I tell you, throughout this journey, there's been more times I've been told I don't belong in a seat or I don't belong at a table. I have been. And to have the career that I have and be in the position that I am, I'm blessed to have what I do have. And
Yeah.
any opportunity I get, I want to continue to elevate our community and get us to that place where we continue to elevate more young brothers, young sisters to do the same thing. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. And thank you. I am out of time, gentlemen. Good luck on October 13th at Wise High School starting at 9 o'clock. That Pops Conference. That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, September 30th. I'm Harold Fisher.